Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Ukraine and the US have, it seems, come to a possible deal regarding the extraction and development of Ukrainian rare earth mineral resources. President Zelenskyy has referred to it as a framework and pointed out that it does not include security guarantees for his country. He's expected to visit President Trump in Washington to go through the details as soon as this Friday. What does this mean for Ukraine, the region, and globally? Well, to lay this out for us, we're joined by Mark Toth, national security and foreign policy expert and a regular contributor to TVP World. Mark, welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Shane, thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir. So, what are the main elements of this framework agreement that the two leaders are going to be discussing tomorrow?
Ashim, I think it's important the way you frame it as a framework. This is a beginning blueprint, if you will, for how ultimately a rare earth minerals deal could be done. Technically, though, it's really a reconstruction plan that they're envisioning. The idea is that the Ukraine's vast wealth in rare earth minerals, estimated to be about $11.5 trillion throughout the entirety of the country, would be Ukraine's way of contributing to it, along with the profits from any future investments that the U.S. does, private and public, in Ukraine on their end, and then as a yet to be determined amount of U.S. investment coming back from, American private and governmental entities, if you will. And so this framework really is kind of outlining this, that there's this agreement in place. It's got a benchmark of $350 billion in terms of what the goals of the fund are to be. And so really, it's more economic in construct. It talks about what, kinds of investments may be made down the line. Those would include hydrocarbons, oils, natural gas, extracting rare earth minerals themselves, infrastructure like the ports, anything that's been damaged, and that would even include state-owned entities in Ukraine that potentially could be there. So it's kind of wide-ranging, but really what it is a prelude to the two sides sitting down and coming up together with an actual funding agreement. That is yet to be determined.
So the funding, let's just get this clear, is good. I mean, Ukraine's going to sell its resources to the United States. The United States revenue that Ukraine earns or raises from the United States is then going to be put into this fund. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, basically what it will be is a co-partnership. I mean, at least as we best understand it. The funding agreement, we'll get to the particulars of this, but really it's about marrying U.S. investment with Ukrainian enterprise to extract these rare earth minerals and to do development deals. So it is going to require outside investment to do it. Ukraine's portion of funding this will be through the 50% profits that come from any of these investment deals that have to be put back into the fund. At least that's how conceptually, in a very broad base, it's being illustrated. Again, the details to be determined. And so that's where the money's going to come from. And then the profits will come, say it's a new port in Odessa. The profits are coming from that port, whether it's transfers of wheat or if they're shipping liquefied gas. That's where the U.S. will start to be paid back, at least as Trump sees it being paid back into this fund. But at this point, the funding agreement itself is to be determined, right? This just hasn't been struck down.
Understood.
I mean, struck out and laid out.
Understood. Okay. But President Zelenskyy has said right from the start that security guarantees for his country are fundamental to any peace deal. And I assume that with the U.S., assuming this deal does go through, with the U.S. interest in this investment, it's in the U.S. interest to provide security guarantees as well, because without security, no one's going to invest. No one's going to come in and dig the stuff up and take it to market.
Yeah, Ashim, you answered the million-dollar question. Look, there's a lot of hyperbole right now. I mean, there's statements coming out of the Oval Office that President Trump did kind of an impromptu press conference after his first cabinet meeting. And he's saying things like, I don't care about the security of Ukraine, that's the European problem and the like. But when you really get down to it, as you just pointed out, this agreement and ultimately a funding agreement, once it comes about, is worthless if you can't guarantee the security of Ukraine. And one of the things that Trump still has to come to terms with is it's estimated, again, I'm basing this off some economists in Lviv in Ukraine, But the best estimates is that half of these value of this 11.5 trillion are sitting in areas currently occupied by Russia. So if Trump believes himself to be this master deal guy, then not only does he have to look about how to secure this, with security guarantees to Ukraine to make sure that Russia doesn't resume its war, but he also has to be asking himself some hard questions now as he negotiates a potential peace deal with Russia. What about getting the Donbass back? What about getting Crimea? Because if not, he's conceding half of this value to Putin, and Putin's getting away with it. He's basically stealing it, whereas the U.S. is, on our side of it, the 50% that the U.S. would be getting, we're having to invest in that ourselves and pay for it, along with the additional monies that have already been spent and allocated to Ukraine. So lots to be determined here. So I'd ignore the hyperbole and start kind of focusing as Trump really realizes what's at stake here. He's got more invested in Ukraine winning and more invested in making sure Ukraine remains secured with these security agreements, than he realizes presently.
Understood. What do you think is going through Putin's head right now as he watches this going on?
Ashim, probably what's going through your head, my head, and everyone else writing about this or commentating on it, we're all trying to keep up with where Trump is at. Because oftentimes, as we've seen in the past couple of days, Trump gets in front of himself. Kind of becomes his own worst enemy, where you think you're going down a path that makes logical sense, and then the carpet gets thrown out from under you. And you don't, you're not sure if you're seeing what you thought you saw, and you're not sure that Trump's going down the same strategic path that you were thinking. So, initially, Putin was ecstatic. When you look at where the U.S. was in terms of Riyadh, the meetings there, statements made at the Munich conference, at the Ukraine contact group at NATO in Brussels last week, all of those things were basically the U.S. capitulating talking points and negotiating positions to Russia. It was madness. We were sitting here and basically saying, why would you concede all of this? It's not how you negotiate. And then suddenly, after, a couple of days of where everyone from Elon Musk to Trump to Trump's oldest son, Donald Trump Jr., they were all blasting Zelenskyy, and they couldn't be vile enough in their condemnations of Zelenskyy. And then suddenly today, to get to the heart of your question, it's a complete reversal, right? This is a deal that Putin has to be seeing. He can see through the hyperbole, too, that he realizes this deal from a U.S. standpoint only has value if Putin loses his strategic positioning in Ukraine and can't go after the rest of Ukraine. So I think Putin at this point probably is frustrated, and we have some evidence of that. I'll make one other quick point here. Lavrov came out today basically saying, look, the hostilities are not going to stop. We're going to continue to push forward. He pushed back against the idea of European peacekeepers in Ukraine, which Trump said he thought was a possibility, and claimed that Putin said that would be okay. Lavrov said, no, that's not the case. So, I think Russia at this point is in a little bit of like, oh, my God, was this what we thought it was? Or, is this becoming a bad deal for us?
Yes. Now, the fighting obviously hasn't stopped yet. What do you think is going to happen with regard to at least a ceasefire, if not a peace deal? Because presumably Putin wants to grab as much of that land as possible as a negotiating chip, a bargaining chip, for any peace talks, because valuable land. How do you think peace talks are going to come about? Is Trump going to, I don't know, do one of his techniques, his negotiating techniques?
Yeah, Ashim, I think the way that I would look at it is I suspect, I can't know, I wish I had the crystal ball, but I suspect that what we're going to see here is Putin will overreach. We've seen it already, and there's some good reason to, because from a negotiating standpoint, there are all these green lights being given by Trump. When you look at General Kellogg beating 86th as the chief envoy and replaced by Steve Witkoff, that was a bad sign. That was a cave. When you looked at, Trump today saying that there's no way, that it's not likely that Ukraine is going to become part of NATO, that's another concession. So in my mind, when they get to the negotiating table, where it really starts to matter, when you start to put the verbiage down and you're starting to hammer this out, I think they're going to overreach. And I think, from my standpoint, as well as Colonel John Sweet, my writing partner, it's our view that Putin is going to still have to lose on the battlefield before he realizes that he's going to have to give up a lot at the negotiating table. So I'm not as hopeful as Trump is that the negotiating table is going to produce much yet. I think, hopefully as Trump goes along and realizes it's in the best interest for Ukraine to win back as much of that territory as possible, because that's only going to make that reconstruction fund all the more valuable, that he'll get that as well, and that he won't handcuff Ukraine to the same extent that Biden did in terms of restrictions on the use of deep strike precision weapons. He'll provide more military equipment that's needed to do combined arms warfare. So I think we're still headed, we're looking at a longer battle here than many suspect. I think there's more to come, unfortunately, given, the humanitarian costs.
Understood. Okay, now I want to zoom out a little bit. Now, one of the reasons, of course, that Trump is so keen to get access to these rare earth minerals and metals and so on is to reduce China's control over that marketplace. Xi Jinping's watching this. What do you think his favourite outcome might be in terms of this agreement and in terms of peace?
Yeah, Sheen, this is exactly why I enjoy coming on TVP World, because Poland and yourself and your network is one of the few that gets the connection of China into all of this equation. It often gets overlooked here in the U.S. Part of the Belt and Road Initiative has two key arteries that go through Ukraine, and ultimately one of them ends up in Poland. And that was China's long-term bet about how to dominate the EU marketplace, and that's been on hold since then. And part of those arteries going through Ukraine was to do exactly what you just alluded to, which is to help extract those rare earth minerals for themselves. They're already doing that in Africa to a great extent. They've developed ports, et cetera, and they're extracting those minerals in Africa and taking them back to China. They want to be able to do the same thing. So Trump needs to be mindful of that as well, and that any kind of deal that becomes a win for Russia and Ukraine also becomes a win for China. And so from that standpoint, I think, it's just yet one more reason why Trump has to look at this and go, I can't just let Europe worry about this from a security agreement standpoint. We've got to do these guarantees as well. But you're smart, astute. You're right on target to bring that up, because that is a huge factor here.
So a more holistic response by Trump is probably what's being called for. Mark Toth, unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. But as always, thank you so much for shedding so much light on the topic. Have a good day, sir.
My honor. Thank you, Ashim. You too.
Thank you. Bye now. And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.